Hello, everyone. This is Amani Jackson with the Queenhood, and today we have a very special guest. We will be discussing real estate development with Evon Smith. Evon, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. You have a very bright smile on this Saturday morning.
It's
Thank you
beautiful
for taking
out.
Thank you for taking out some time. So we're going to jump into our interview to make sure that we get all of the information that we can get to help our viewers today. I want to start with what real estate development is. I don't think everyone has a clear understanding of that. So let's just move into that. What is a real estate developer?
A real estate developer is typically someone whose primary focus is to look at parcels of land and to determine the highest and best use of that land given the particular criteria for development for that particular municipality. And those real estate developers that are some look at properties for clients and some do speculative type development where they have a vision for the site and then they ultimately plan it out and then go find the tenants to locate in that particular site. Primarily, time and time again, there's usually a marriage between the developer's vision and the end tenants that are going to locate there. And so they modify the vision that the developer had as a result.
Okay, awesome. And I don't know if you've seen the movie Barbershop, but I think that maybe some of our listeners and viewers could understand it better in those terms. Did you see the movie Barbershop?
I did, but I can't remember all the nuances of what went on in it.
Yeah, it was I think developers came into a community and they were buying out some of the hometown stores and properties and the homes, and they were offering people money for their homes, for their land, and then they were building up the community. And is that kind of like the people who watch movies, what they can relate it to?
Absolutely, absolutely. So you're on point. I remember the jokes more.
Yes, just trying to keep it relatable to my generation because I know that that's a popular movie. So let's just make it a little more personable at this time. Tell us a little about yourself and what it is particularly that you do in the real estate development game.
Sure. I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts, and moved to North Carolina in my ninth grade year. Um, Moved to Eastern North Carolina, which is a very rural area, and was faced with a plethora of poverty and social issues for the low-income residents in that area, and more specifically the minorities and what they were challenged with. There was mostly white African American and Mexican residents in the area. So each culture had its own set of challenges, and then left there to go to school in Raleigh, and
Okay,
was able to attend the illustrious Shaw University.
that's right.
And
My grandfather lives there.
yeah, graduated from Shaw and went to work during my years at Shaw. I went to work for First Citizens Bank. And in banking, I went through the management training program and learned an awful lot about commercial banking. And that's where my love for real estate development began. And later moved into community economic development, which allowed me to apply my finance background, having been a branch manager for First Citizens Bank and with BB&T for a period of time, and then also self-help credit union. I was able to apply all of that lending background to community economic development, which really is the work of helping communities to develop themselves and obtain a quality of life that a standard that they value.
Mhm. Okay. And I'm glad that you said that they value because it seems a lot of times some communities when we come in and we develop, sometimes they value tradition more than the progress that the city wants to make. And so there seems to be a balance that I would think needs to be kept because I know especially the older generations, they're a lot more reluctant when they look at the historical aspects of it, or just from nostalgia, not wanting to move forward and wanting to stay with where they are. So How does it really affect communities, do you think?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Developers might see an opportunity for the utilization of the square footage that's in existence.
Mhm.
And for one thing, and the community might say, hey, no, we value the history behind this facility. We want to retain that. We want to restore it. And a developer might say, hey, that adds cost to the project. We could do this project much more cost effectively. And the community, of course, may not value price over history and its nostalgic remembrances of what once was there. So you have to marry, collaborate, help folks to mediate their concerns and their issues, and try to find a happy medium, and a ground where things can happen, but happen with taking everyone's needs into consideration. And it's not always easy. In some of my projects, we've done master planning with professional master planners who are architects that come in and do site design for large and or small landscapes or sites. And what happens is, in that process, and I came to love the master planning process because typically charrettes are held, which are small community meetings, to help community residents have and stakeholders have input into the process, so that what the outcomes are, everyone is bought in and supportive of the outcomes, because it's the community and the developers coming together and the professionals, business community, and what have you, coming together to come up with what is the best solution for that community, so that everybody's bought in and supports what happens ultimately.
I'm glad that you mentioned that because that was my next question. And so you said that it's basically like a small town hall meeting. And I think that people should be familiar with that term where you're able to participate in the discussions of what's going on in your locality. And so, and not to throw you under the bus at all, but about how much of their feedback or their opinion do you find is actually valued and implemented in the development stages?
Well, that's the reason I came to love community economic development, because economic development in and of itself does not necessarily have to involve community. And when you are immersed in the study of and the implementation of community economic development, the community is the driving force. And that is extremely important, because what outsiders value may not be what the community values. And also, at times, outsiders may want to take a community faster than they're ready to go. You wouldn't take a very massive highway system into a rural area just because
Right.
it needs easy transportation for larger cities. You have to take into consideration what those communities value and what's in their best interest and what they're comfortable supporting. And then it also it rolls up to the political structure and where funds and revenues get dispensed. Those communities have to have a say in where their tax dollars go. And when developers take the stakeholders' opinions and desires into consideration, I think you always end up with a much better product at the
Absolutely.
end.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to try to get you into my neighborhood because I feel like it takes me far too long to get to the interstate from where I live. I'm definitely joking. They would find me and they would get rid of me. So let me just ask you, what has been one of your favorite projects that you've worked on and what made it a favorite of yours?
Well, I have a lot of favorites. I've been blessed to be able to work in communities, low resource communities across the state. One of my most favorite was my church in Raleigh, North Carolina, under the Ronald E. Avery pastor, St. Matthew's, which was on 401 North in Raleigh. And the reason it was so important was because our church wanted to expand and was very taxed with how to do a capital campaign, where the money might come from, how massive a structure they needed to do, and how elaborate a structure they needed to do. And working with my church really helped me to see people where they were, and what their values were, and how they came together to ultimately create something that would be for the better good and for the broader good of the members of the church. So you had certain auxiliaries that agreed for their budget to be dedicated to the capital campaign, and so their auxiliary might have been suspended for a period of time. The work that they were doing, of course, they basically had to give up what their goals were for a minute while the proceeds went on the capital campaign.
Right.
And to see people put forth that kind of effort and to collaborate in that way, it helped me significantly in all the work that I've done throughout the state to be able to help people get to a happy medium and collaborate. And, you know, there are sometimes contentious discussions that have to happen, but there's a way to get through that and help people with understanding. And communication is a huge part of it.
Mhm.
Communication and evaluating everybody and everybody's opinion, understanding that people come from different perspectives because of their past, and you want to make sure you help them get to where they need to be and what works for them and what they can and cannot live with in this process. So
Right.
that really was my groundwork. I'd say my infrastructure for what I'm doing.
Mhm. And how long have you been in real estate development?
Pretty much about 30, almost 30 years in finance and real estate development, and specifically 20 years in community economic development.
It sounds like you've had a very strong educational background and extreme amount of experience in the financial sector and then in the real estate development sector. But with all of that history and education behind you, I'm sure, do you still feel as though you're learning new things as you go, especially with the changing society and community setups?
Absolutely. Policies are always changing, so you have to stay abreast of that. Funding sources are always changing. So in a lot of my projects, we get federal, state, and local funding. With that, you have to be very resourceful on how you bring in angel capital, how you bring in venture capital, how you bring in philanthropic money, who you work with. Sometimes you might work with an entity that doesn't qualify for certain funds, and they may need to, for their vision to be realized, they need to be open to collaborating with other groups. And sometimes we have to pretty much foster that collaboration and sometimes be the facilitator for that collaboration to happen.
Absolutely. I heard you mention a lot of means of funding, and what I'm going to encourage our listeners and viewers to do is to connect with you. I'm going to post your contact information and have you offer it. And I'm just going to advise people who are interested in understanding those different means of funding to connect with you so that they can get further information, or they can, definitely look it up themselves. But I wanted to move on to some other very important questions that we have for you, Yvonne. Why did you think it was important to go into different communities with SCR services? And what are SCR services?
Well, I developed sustainable community resources in 2011, basically. We started with another company in 2010, but we changed over in 2011, primarily because I went to a Harvard executive leadership training in 2007. And as a result of that, I wrote a regional development plan. And the reason I thought it was so important was I did not want to see each community have to go through the same struggles to try to access federal, state, and local funding. A lot of people in communities don't know how funding flows down from the federal government to their state, ultimately to their community. A lot of people don't know what CDBG is and what that funding can do, community development block grant funding. A lot of people don't know what rural development is or USDA and how those funds can be managed or utilized or accessed. And it's
I'm
so
one of those
important.
people. I'm one of those people. I'm like, what are these terms? What is she saying? They
Right.
sound
It's
important.
so important because those are the vehicles that your tax dollars go into. And if you don't know what they are or how to utilize them, a lot of our communities are just at a loss to be able to pull those funds into their communities after paying taxes for targeted projects that they'd like to have done. So sometimes what I've seen in low resource communities, we'll sit back and say, somebody ought to take care of that. Somebody should do something about that pothole, or somebody should do something about that tree that's fallen, or somebody should do something about those dilapidated buildings. The kids are going to get hurt if they keep playing around those buildings. Somebody should do something. Well, the somebody that I realize is us. And until we come together and share the information and work together to make that change happen, a lot of times we're just sitting in our communities waiting for some outside developer to say, hey, I have an idea for that area. And the outside developer who's using private money may not involve the community and doesn't have to by law.
Wow. And that is, I am blown. I am blown because, I myself sit back and I'm like, these potholes are still here. Like, where is my tax money going? And it's going to everything and everywhere but what the community a lot of times really needs, because we are not aware. We're so ignorant of the things that we are capable of requesting or going after. We don't know who to go to. A lot of people don't have the community's best interest at heart. They're looking at the bigger picture. They're looking at trade and economics and all that stuff, and they're not looking at the community itself. And so again, readers and listeners, viewers, please connect with Evon to try to get some resources and get you pointed in the right direction, because we're wondering where our tax money is going. This is our hard-earned money. This is money that we pay, and this is money that we deserve to see some type of return on that benefits our communities, our families, our children. That is amazing. And so what are you doing right now in the communities and in the government to get these SCRs out there and these other programs that you're working with and supporting? How is it that you're trying to get this out there?
We're working in various communities. We have projects in Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Asheville area, and also over on the eastern part of the state. We're just starting to look at some opportunities to help folks there. But the real means of communicating our work right now is on the internet and also word of mouth. So we're just asking people like yourself to let your churches know, let your nonprofits know, hey, there is a group who has significant experience in doing community economic development, and they can come in and help us with help you with your projects, and the communities with the projects and goals that they may have. And there's nothing wrong with saying to your local municipality, hey, we would like SCR to come in and be the voice of the community at the table to help us have a say-so in what goes on and what's being developed here locally.
That's awesome. And what areas are you able to go into? I know that the whole country is a very large landscape for you. So what areas are you currently feasibly able to work in?
Sure. Currently, we're focused on North Carolina. We've been asked to come into Huntsville, Alabama. Most recently, we've gotten a request for Kentucky. And we're trying to be very targeted in our approach. So right now, we're focused on North Carolina, just looking at feasibility analysis in some of those other areas and taking it day by day.
Mhm. I'm gonna ask you to go into New Jersey, my hometown, because I ride through there a lot, and I'm like, what's happening here?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
need some help.
yeah.
But I'm sure you'll get there. I'm sure you're gonna get
Thank
there.
you. But we look forward to helping communities across the country.
Awesome. So how have women been received in this industry based on your experience? I understand that you're one of the few African American women in your field.
Absolutely. So just in the state of North Carolina, I'm only aware of two African American females doing this work on the private side. Traditionally, you would find African American females working in community economic development through community development corporations. But at this point, I'm only aware of two of us doing it on the private side. Uh, Quite frankly, across the country, there are very few women, period, working in the industry. But I was thankfully trained on my large project development by a white Jewish woman from Baltimore, who Judy Siegel, who was just phenomenal in doing this work. And I would venture to say there are probably across the country maybe 10 to 15 women doing large scale projects, period, let alone the number of African American women.
Why do you think that is? What do you think about the industry makes women shy away from it, or just is something that they have no idea about? What do you think it is that has created this?
Well, I think it's very much a good old boys club, and it's a high risk business, and you can't you got to pay to play, and it's very hard to break in. The amount of money and the amount of risk that it takes in development. Surely, uh, conglomerates that are typically male headed are those that are participating in this space. So hopefully, we'll see more women in this field as we continue to talk about it, continue to create pathways for women to get involved. And one of the ways that SCR is trying to do that is through our internships. We try to go into local universities and utilize the student population there, help acclimate them to the work and to the industry.
Awesome, awesome. Do you see a need for real estate development to be inclusive of community citizens?
Absolutely. As we spoke earlier about the charrette process, I think it's a must-have in order for the developments to be a win-win, not only for the community, but for the cities and townships and for the developers. It's absolutely imperative.
Okay. Why do you feel advocacy for minority participation is important in your work with local municipalities and small businesses?
Well, when you talk about the economic portion of community economic development, that's where that comes in. The communities in which these developments are happening need to participate. And so when you have that dollar circulating within that community, you would want for a developer to look for a general contractor who is going to be inclusive in the trades that they hire for. And I talk about being inclusive, you want if you're going to generate $5 million for a project, or say $30 million, you want to make sure that you're looking locally first for those that can participate in the project, because that's their tax dollars. If the municipality has any money in the project, that's that local residents' tax dollars going to work. So why shouldn't they get an opportunity to participate? And then ultimately, if there's not availability locally, you surely want to make an effort to look for folks that are definitely diverse. You want to look to have diversity in every project. You want to look to use these projects as a means for training and development of the local population. If you have people but they're untrained, what things can they do on that project? And so it's very important for the developer and for the general contractors and for the local municipalities to have a community-based focus when it comes to economic participation. It's just imperative. Again, this is how you help your state grow, your community grow, your individuals to be able to take care of their families and their local businesses. It's just imperative.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think that that's one of the reasons minorities are not getting what they need in their communities because they don't understand that. And so thank you so much for that information. I'm sure it does, but do politics play a major role in your work?
Absolutely. And every project, as you know, um, the projects have to gain approval and authorization to proceed by the local municipality. And sometimes where developers fall short on funding, they'll go to the local municipality for financing. And so it's important for the politicians to be aware of the community's needs and desires. In affluent communities, you always see that they show up for the city council meetings, the town hall meetings. They make sure that their voices are heard. You don't see large grocery stores and other things going into a high-end residential community without it being representative of the quality and value of that community. However, you can go into low income communities and see the package store, you see the unkept beauty supply places, you see the restaurants and the marketing being somewhat, um, well, being very much dilapidated and non-appeal, eye-appealing, curb-appealing, you name it. And that's because the advocacy and the work of the local politicians on behalf of those communities has to be held to a standard whereby the community is actually having a voice at the table and feeling represented. And so
Mhm.
it goes to development as well. You have to have a voice at the table and be represented on whatever's being proposed for your community. And the first step to doing that is reaching out to your local politicians and making sure that whatever they're voting on is representative of what the community desires to have. And if you're not at the table, then you really are hard pressed to say anything because you haven't bothered to lend your voice to the discussion.
That's interesting. That may be the one of the causes that we see remodeling and renovations in some of our community stores and places of like recreation. Maybe the community has spoken up and the local politicians have had to step in for advocacy. So that's very interesting. Are there any exciting projects that you're currently working on besides the SCRs that you're excited about or that the community might want to get involved in or just know about that, they may not know about at this time?
Well, one of the real exciting projects is the Union Square project in Greensboro. I'm one of the developers on that project, and we have worked very hard to try to make that project one that the community can be proud of. The first building that's been put on the ground is done by a sub developer, which is the nonprofit that is a collaboration between North Carolina A&T State University and also the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. So they have a simulation lab in that building, and they have a nursing program where they're educating students on nursing, and they're utilizing. Uh, they're not really robots, but they're simulated humans so that they can learn about different techniques and skills that they need for then practicing later. So this is very important work, and as a result, there's been beautification to the community and the former Lee Street, which is currently Gate City Boulevard now. There's already been beautification of that area done, and we're working on additional infrastructure to go in so that subcomponent developers can do other portions of the project as it's laid out in the master plan.
Is there any one particular element that you try to include in each project, like trying to bring in at least one major restaurant chain, trying to bring in an aspect of nightlife to bring in like the younger communities into the area to generate more revenue, um, banking? Is there any one element that you try to implement into each of your projects,
So
or is it just
every
dependent on the community?
It really depends on the community. The element that we try to carry is try to get as much local inclusion as possible. Try to get as much minority participation as possible. Try to make sure that whatever dollars are being spent in that community, that the community gets a good opportunity to participate. And that includes we include what we buy as well. So our buying power, spending power, making sure that on the supply side that we're looking local first in as much as we can, and then expanding to our outreach as needed, where there's a limitation on availability for the trades and or for supply.
I think that's important. I think that a lot of times communities are scared that the small mom and pops and the locals are going to be pushed out and the big names are going to be brought in to replace them and take out the feel of the community. And so I think that that is a very, very excellent thing for you to be doing as a practice. Whew, well, I feel so full. I feel absolutely full of knowledge and just things that I had no idea about before. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels like this. Was there anything else that was, relative that you wanted to share with us? This has been amazing.
Well, thank you so much. I just appreciate you and the other young folks that have reached out to us to learn more about our work because we want to spread the word. We want people to understand that this is doable and that this is a career path that young people need to consider because your voice and your skill sets are needed in this area. Um, we're really struggling to get more minorities involved on the design side. Engineers, architects, all of that, they need to be at the table as well because it will inform what is done in communities of color. So we're excited about the work and thank you again for taking the time to interview me.
Not a problem. I do want to just add that I think it's highly important what you're doing with the interns as well. For one, a lot of minorities are not getting as involved in the maths and the sciences and the architectures and the engineering as they should. And these are very vital. If you look at the way that the community and the career paths are going, a lot of career fields are not as lucrative. If we want to talk about money, they're not as lucrative as the ones that we tend to be going into. And so this seems to be a very lucrative career path and also a very necessary one because you are involved in the development of communities, and that's very important. It has a lot of importance for minorities. It has a lot of importance for families. It's just very important. So it's needed and it's financially stable. I mean, you could really create a great life off of it. And so I just really want to thank you for that and encourage young people to branch into these. A lot of times we have, dreams of fancy and we want to be certain things, but we really want to look into the career paths that make sense. What's going to endure, technology, nursing, the ones that are going to be there the way that society is advancing in the long run. We're always going to be developing communities. We're always going to need technology. We're always going to need medicine and pharmaceuticals and so we need to really think about that when we're making our plans for our future. And these are the times that we need to think about them. So Evon, thank you so much. We're going to ask you one final question. How can people get in touch with you?
All right. Please have them email me at esmithscr, the number two, at gmail.com. That would be great. And also, they're welcome to visit our website, which will be up soon, www.scrtriad.com.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure that those links are listed in case you want to check them out later. Well, Evon, thank you so much for spending some of your Saturday with us. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you again, Amani.